Just once. Please. Jack Bennett's voice, a man who'd never asked anyone for help with anything, broke on the last word as he knelt on the cold tile of a nearly empty flower shop, his son screaming in his arms. Maya Reyes stood frozen behind the counter, potting soil under her nails and a grief she'd told no one about pressing on her chest. For 3 weeks now, her body had kept doing what it used to do for a baby who never came home. The shop's bell hadn't rung in days. The bank had already sent its second notice. Orlando had stopped noticing she existed. But when Noah's cry cut through the quiet, something in Maya moved before her mind caught up. She crossed the room, reached out and said, "Give him to me." Tell us in the comments where you're tuning in from today. Subscribe if you want to see how far this goes. What Maya finds out about the man kneeling in front of her will change everything she thought she knew about grief, love, and second chances. The bell above the shop door hadn't rung since Tuesday, and Maya Reyes had stopped expecting it to. She stood among buckets of roses that were beginning to wilt faster than she could sell them, running her thumb along the edge of a past due notice she'd already read 4 times. The numbers didn't change no matter how long she stared. Rent, wholesale invoices, the loan she'd taken out the year everything fell apart. All of it stacked higher than the shop had ever earned in a month. Outside, Orlando's rare cold snap fogged the windows, and Maya hugged her cardigan tighter, telling herself it was the weather making her shiver and not the quiet panic sitting behind her ribs. She didn't let herself think about the nursery she'd painted and never used. Not today. Today was for surviving until tomorrow. Across the city, in a modest 2-story house with a swing set no one used anymore, Jack Bennett stood over a crib that had been empty of peace for 11 days straight. His son Noah was screaming again, small fists shaking, face red from a hunger that refused every bottle Jack tried. Jack had built a small contracting business from nothing, working sunup to sundown to give his family a life. None of it meant anything in this room. A pediatrician had come and gone that morning, offering formulas, supplements, theories. And still Noah cried, thinner each day, weaker each night, mourning a mother he'd never had the chance to know. Jack pressed a hand against the crib rail, knuckles white with the grip. He was a man used to solving problems with his hands and his stubbornness, and this was the first one that answered to neither. His sister had called that morning to say the doctors were running out of ideas. Jack hadn't answered. He was already thinking of something else. Something a nurse at the hospital had mentioned in passing, almost as an aside, about a florist across town who'd lost her own baby and whose milk, cruelly, hadn't stopped coming. He forgot to grab his jacket and went straight for Noah's carrier. The bell rang. Maya looked up, expecting no one, and found a man filling her doorway, exhausted in a way that went past sleep, cradling something wrapped in a white blanket against his chest that was shaking the air apart with its cries. "Please." His voice cracked open on the single word. I don't know what else to do. Please." Maya's hands had gone still on the counter. She didn't know him, but she knew that look, the look of someone who had run out of every other option. None of the rest mattered in the moment his knees hit her floor, right there among the buckets of tulips, a grown man undone in front of her. "His name is Noah," Jack said, and something in his composure gave way entirely. "He won't eat. He hasn't eaten right in days. His mother," he stopped, "couldn't finish it. Didn't have to." The baby's cry hit something in Maya that she hadn't let herself feel in 3 weeks. A physical ache that answered before her mind caught up to what was happening. She was already moving around the counter, already reaching, and Jack lifted the baby toward her like he was handing over the only thing left that mattered. The second Noah settled against her, his cries broke into hiccups, then into silence. Maya looked down at the small red face finally going slack with relief and felt her own eyes sting. Behind her, she was aware of Jack still on his knees, the cold air still clinging to his jacket, the strangeness of a stranger this undone in her shop. None of it felt as real as the weight in her arms. "There," she whispered, mostly to the baby. "There you go." Jack didn't get up. He just watched her like he couldn't quite believe it either. The house wasn't grand. A chain-link fence, a garage full of half-finished projects, a porch light that had been left on for weeks out of habit more than purpose. It didn't look like a home anymore. It looked like a place someone was surviving in, not living in. Jack carried her single overnight bag himself, Noah asleep against Maya's shoulder, and led her through rooms that still had his late wife's handwriting on a grocery list stuck to the fridge. Everything was tidy in the way that grief makes things tidy. Untouched, careful, afraid to disturb what was left behind. Maya had grown up in a house with peeling paint and a mother who filled every room with something blooming. This place had nothing alive in it at all. "Guest rooms down the hall," Jack said, gesturing vaguely, already exhausted in a way sleep wouldn't fix. "Noah's is beside it. If you need anything, just knock. I'm usually up anyway." He said it like a man reciting instructions he'd rehearsed rather than considered, the words of someone still getting used to letting anyone help him. Maya nodded, adjusting the baby in her arms, and didn't say what she was thinking, that a house this quiet shouldn't feel this heavy. By her second morning, she'd already rearranged things without asking. A vase of grocery store daisies on the kitchen table. Sunlight let into the nursery through curtains she'd pulled fully open for the first time in what looked like months. She sang to Noah while she fed him, low and off-key, and didn't notice at first that Jack had paused in the doorway to listen, a coffee mug going cold in his hand. Slowly, carefully, the house began to change shape around her. Jack started coming home earlier from job sites. He lingered near the nursery door longer than he needed to, watching Maya hum to his son like it was the most natural thing in the world. For the first time since Noah was born, the house felt less like a place people were enduring and more like it might, someday, be a home again. It was a phone call that first caught Maya's attention. Not the words, which she couldn't make out, but the way Jack's voice dropped low and tight in the hallway, the way he said, "She has no right to just show up," like it cost him something to keep from shouting it. Linda, Jack's late wife's mother. Maya had heard the name before, always spoken carefully, the way you'd handle something sharp. She told herself it wasn't her business. But that afternoon, folding Noah's laundry, she found a business card tucked half under the crib mattress. A family law attorney's name and number, and on the back, in handwriting that wasn't Jack's, 3 words, "For my grandson." Maya didn't feed it to her own panic right away. She sat with it a long time, turning the card over in her hands, running through every rational explanation and believing none of them. In the morning, she said nothing to Jack. Instead, she asked his sister carefully what Linda had been like since the funeral. His sister's answer came a beat too slow, her eyes flicking toward the door before she spoke. That unease sent Maya paying closer attention that week, more watchful than she let on. She noticed the way Linda's name came up in careful, clipped sentences. She noticed a missed call log on the house phone with the same number 3 times in 2 days. She noticed Jack's jaw tighten every time the mail came. Maya thought of the card hidden under the mattress. She thought of Jack's face the day he'd knelt on her shop floor, desperate and unguarded, and wondered whether the hardest part of losing his wife had ever really been over. or whether it had simply moved closer, waiting for the right moment to knock. That night, she asked him outright. Dr. Whitman, Noah's pediatrician, had known the family since before Noah was born. A steady, unhurried man who delivered more hard news to more parents than he liked to count. Maya trusted him the way she trusted very few people in this new life, and when she finally asked him, gently in the waiting room after an appointment, what he knew about Linda, she watched his easy expression shift into something more careful. She's grieving too, he said. But grief doesn't always make people gentle. It's not really about the will or the money. It's about not wanting Noah to be raised by anyone who isn't blood. He paused. She's spoken to a lawyer. I know because she asked me for Noah's records last month, before she'd even asked Jack. Maya felt the ground shift under her. She thought of the card under the mattress, the missed calls, the way Jack flinched at the mail. That night, when Noah was finally down, she found Jack on the back porch, staring at nothing, a beer he hadn't touched sweating on the railing beside him. I found the lawyer's card, she said quietly, sitting beside him. I should have told you sooner. I'm sorry. Jack didn't look angry. He looked tired in a way that went bone deep. Linda thinks I can't do this, he said. Thinks a single dad with a failing business and a housekeeper he pays too much has no business raising her daughter's son alone. She's not entirely wrong about the business part. A short, humorless laugh. She wants custody. Not forever, she says. Just until I get myself together. You are together, Maya said. I've watched you. Every bottle, every fever, every 3 a.m. you show up. That's the whole job, Jack. You're doing it. He looked at her then, really looked, like he was seeing something he hadn't let himself notice yet. You believe that? I know it, Maya said. I've been in this house 8 weeks. I've never once seen you not show up. The mediation was set for a gray Tuesday morning. A conference room with too much fluorescent light and a mediator who'd clearly seen this exact grief 100 times before. Linda sat across the table, composed and precise, a folder of her own in front of her. Pediatrician visits Jack had missed during the worst of his wife's illness. A late electric bill from the year everything fell apart. Anything that could be made to look like evidence instead of what it actually was. A man barely holding on. Jack's hands were steady on the table, but Maya, sitting 1 row behind him, could see the tension climbing his shoulders with every page Linda's lawyer turned. When it was her turn to speak, invited, at Jack's request, as someone who'd lived in the house and cared for Noah daily, Maya didn't recite prepared lines. She talked about the 4 a.m. feedings Jack never once slept through without waking first. She talked about the way he'd rebuilt the porch railing himself so Noah could learn to walk on solid ground. She talked about a man who had knelt on the floor of her shop, not out of weakness, but because asking for help when his son needed it was the bravest thing she'd ever watched someone do. Grief doesn't disqualify a parent, she said, looking at Linda now, her voice gentler than she expected it to be. It doesn't mean he's failing Noah. It means he's still standing after everything, and Noah gets to grow up watching what that looks like. Linda didn't answer right away. When she finally spoke, her voice had lost its edge. I just don't want to lose him too, she said quietly. Noah is all I have left of her. The room went still. Jack reached across the table, an offering rather than a defense. You won't lose him, he said. He's your grandson. He always will be. But he's my son. And I'm not going anywhere. It wasn't a courtroom victory speech. It was 2 grieving people finally saying the true thing out loud. By the end of the hour, the lawyers had stopped talking, and what remained was a plan. Regular visits, no more locked doors, a family finding its way to something other than a fight. A year had softened almost everything about the house on Maple Street. The chain-link fence was still there, but the yard behind it was green now, a sandbox in one corner and Noah's laughter carrying through the open kitchen window most afternoons. Chasing after a dog Jack had sworn he'd never allow and now couldn't imagine the house without. Jack had spent the year rebuilding the business the same patient way he rebuilt everything else. One job, one referral, one Saturday at a time, until Bennett Contracting had a wait list instead of a stack of unpaid invoices. It hadn't been easy, and it hadn't been quick, but it was steady now, and steady was its own kind of miracle. Maya's shop had grown too, into something twice its old size, shelves of flowers now standing beside cases of fresh red roses. A name painted across the window in gold letters she'd chosen herself. Jack had helped her rebuild the storefront himself on weekends, watching with quiet pride as the shop filled with customers who came back not out of pity, but because the bell above the door had started to mean something warm. Linda came by on Sundays now, sitting on the back porch with a cup of coffee, watching Noah run circles around the yard. It hadn't healed all at once, but it had healed. On a clear evening in early spring, Jack found Maya at the shop after closing, Noah asleep against her shoulder the way he'd been the very first day. He didn't kneel this time. He simply took her hand, steady where it had once shaken, and asked her plainly to build a life with him. Not out of desperation, not out of grief, just the two of them and their son, choosing each other freely for the first time. Maya looked at him for a long moment, flour still dusting her apron, the shop glowing warm behind her, and said yes before he finished the question. Outside, the city moved on around them, unaware that the exhausted single dad who'd once knelt on a flower shop floor had finally found the only thing he'd ever really wanted: a quiet life and a family to fill it. Looking back, it was strange to think how it all began. A crying baby, a desperate father on his knees, and a woman who had nothing left to lose but said yes anyway. Maya often thought that if she hadn't crossed that counter, hadn't trusted the ache in her own chest, none of this, the shop, the laughter down the hall, Noah's small hand wrapped around her finger, would exist at all. Jack, for his part, no longer measured his life by what he'd lost, but by ordinary evenings that once felt impossible to imagine surviving into. What started as one desperate ask became the foundation of everything good in both their lives. If this story moved you, don't scroll past without letting us know. Hit like, share it with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe so you never miss what we tell next. There's always another story worth staying for.